Hello, everybody. I can't tell you how fun it is to be in a room with people as opposed to little squares on a computer screen. I do, the last little while, been a lot of Zoom type things, and I try to make my sessions, you know, I think I have a little bit of a sense of humor, so I occasionally will make some comment that I think is amusing, and then when you're on a Zoom call, I see a bunch of squares and people going. It's just very strange not to get that feedback of whether it's working or not. I think he's laughing. He might be having an attack of some kind. I'm not sure. So my name is Dave Cross. As I said, I've been basically for the last 35 years, I've been teaching Photoshop. I taught my first Photoshop class 2 weeks after it came out in 1990, which means, of course, I was a child prodigy and taught it when I was 7. I wish. But because I started with Photoshop first and then digital cameras came along, to me, Photoshop and the camera always went together, as opposed to people who say, I'm taking photographs and now there's this Photoshop thing that I may or may not use. So I've always liked the idea of almost to the point where sometimes I take photos with Photoshop in mind. Like I actually am not just using Photoshop as a tool to fix or enhance something. Yes, I do that too, and we'll talk about that. But mostly, for me, it's times where I see situations I think, oh, if I take that photo, and I'm almost thinking of Photoshop in my head as I'm looking through my lens and my viewfinder, I'm thinking, that could be a background layer, and if I did this, that could be, I could overlay that. So I'm almost thinking like Photoshop. So a number of years ago, I started trying to come up with a term which never really worked, but the best I could do was Photoshopatography. So it's kind of like thinking of Photoshop with your camera in mind and vice versa. Now, before we go too far for this session today, let me address the elephant in the room that was created by AI, and that is AI in Photoshop. So will I be talking about that? A little bit. But to me, it still ultimately is all about your image. So when I do things with AI, most of the time, I'm still starting with my imagery. So it's not like just typing in something and having something randomly created for me. It's about what can I do with my images to make a result that I really like. So that's kind of where I'm aiming today. So as we go along, a couple of little notes for you. The first one is, about 10 minutes before I came here, I suddenly realized that my Wacom tablet was in the safe in my hotel room. So I went over to the Wacom booth. I said, any chance you have an extra tablet? And they said, sure. And they handed me this wonderful tablet to shout out to them. But unfortunately, I didn't have the time or the adapters to make it work. So I'm trackpadding it today, baby, which is always fun when you're trying to show your expertise with things. And it's like, let me use my trackpad. So, but we will prevail. Because the good thing is, with some of the new enhanced tools in Photoshop, you don't have to have as much worry about a mouse or a pen or anything of that nature. The other thing is, I'm at a stage in my life where I need glasses to see far away, but I can't see my computer screen. So I am now about to take my glasses off, which means I will not see anyone else for the whole rest of the time. So we will take questions at the end, but someone else is going to have to tell me if someone has a question, because I can't tell. So what we're going to be talking about today is this kind of thing where you have a photograph, and now with the new enhanced capabilities in Photoshop, it's much easier to make a selection. And then if you want to, you can put some other kind of background in. So you're still taking your photography, but you're doing something with it to make life more interesting. And just as an aside, I'm a firm believer in using Photoshop for everything. So this is the world's most expensive presentation software, Photoshop. So I'm just using a method where I can press a couple of things and go to a full screen view. So there we are. OK, now we're back in Photoshop. So let's start off with kind of the basic idea here. If we have a photo we've taken, and we want to just say, well, overall, I'm really happy with this photograph, but there might be something I need to enhance. So in this case, if we zoom in a little closer, you can see this particular park has some arrows randomly. I don't know what exactly they're for, to say walk this way, perhaps, I'm not sure. Now, in earlier days of Photoshop, this would have meant our wonderful friend, the clone stamp tool, which if you've ever used the clone stamp tool, you know that you always have to have your finger poised above the undo command, because generally it was like, nope, not quite. So life has got so much better now because we have the ability to go into tools like this one. Okay, come on now, trackpad, cooperate. That's not good. Okay, we're off to a wonderful start here. Okay, I want to just bear with me 1 second. I just need to make one little change here if I can. Sorry, AV people, but okay, I'll just live with it. All right, so this new remove tool, you have the ability to just go around the areas, and I've got this, there's a setting up at the top I have turned off that says remove after each stroke. So I like to do them all at the same time. So I just go through here and circle the ones I want and then hit this key to say, would you please do that for me? And it uses kind of an AI type function to remove them in a way that's so much faster and so much easier than when we were having to worry about, for example, the clone stamp tool or even the healing brush or something like that, where some of the onus was on us. Here it's just about, as long as you identify the areas, it does a pretty good job. And if I take a look, you can see that in this case, I did it all on the same layer because I was quite confident that I didn't want to keep those arrow signs. But you always have the option in Photoshop of working in a way that most people describe as working non-destructively, which means do things in a way that just in case you have the ability to change things up a little bit. So I could have also added a blank layer first and then told it to put the results on the blank layer. So then I'd have the option of turning that on or off. I chose not to do that in that case. But as we go through here, we'll talk about some other things that are definitely non-destructive. So I'm using Adobe Bridge here to take advantage of just a quick way for me to see things. So this is a RAW file, and now I'm starting with Camera Raw, but what I'm going to show you today, combining RAW and Photoshop, could easily be done with Lightroom starting there as well. I'm just doing it in Camera Raw because it's easier. Whenever we have a RAW file, we always have the option down here at the bottom of different ways of opening. And I like to use this option called Open as an Object. And when you do that, and I deliberately didn't make any changes yet in RAW, but just to show you the relationship when you do this, if we, I don't know if I can zoom in here or not, but there's a small little icon on the corner of the background layer that indicates it's this thing called a smart object. And a smart object means it's not a normal image, it has some relationship, some information. In this case, the information is the original RAW information. So that means at any time, even as I'm working in Photoshop, I haven't lost the RAW ability because all I have to do is double click on this and it's going to take me back to Camera Raw. So now I could do whatever changes I want, for example, move the clarity, maybe adjust the vibrance a little bit, whatever I want. And then when I click OK, it updates back in Photoshop. So in a sense, it's almost like we have a RAW editor very much almost inside of Photoshop. We're still going back and forth, but it's a very nice way to take away the fact, by nature, Photoshop is kind of linear, right? You have to go, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this step, and I'm going to do this step. And then when you undo, you have to undo in that same linear way. By taking advantage of smart objects, it means you've kind of taken away that linear aspect, because I could now do, 5 more things, and then still to say, you know what, I think I overdid it with the vibrance, and then just go back and readjust it in Camera Raw, save it, or I should say click OK, and then it updates back in Photoshop. So it's a really nice ability to make any of those kind of changes. By the same token, the other advantage of a smart object is when you have a smart object in Photoshop, and by the way, let me just explain that a little bit. Coming from Camera Raw, I just said open as an object. You can also take any layer or any amount of layers in Photoshop and just tell them to convert to a smart object. So then it has the same end result of what I'm about to show you, is it changes the world of filters. In Photoshop, by default, a normal filter like blur or whatever it might be, it's kind of a one-shot deal, right? You go into the filter, you look at the settings, and if you're like most people, you hover over the OK button going, I think that's good. And if you don't like it, you have to undo, which means, again, it's very much linear. You have to make a decision at that time. Once you have a smart object, when you go to the filter menu, any filter then becomes also editable. So for example, let's just do lens flare just for the sake of it. And I can say, I think I want it positioned up here in the clouds. Then a wonderful, very small preview that's really hard to tell. And there it is. But the difference is, if I had done this on a normal layer, there would be no indication of anything. If I wanted to change it, I'd have to just go back and start over again. But if you look in the layers palette, there's now a thing that says Smart Filter Lens Flare. So I can either turn it off or back on. I can double click on it to remind myself of the settings or to put it somewhere else. So it's definitely changing the impact of filters. Filters for many people were kind of like, well, I guess I'll try this, and if I don't like it 10 minutes from now, I'm kind of out of luck, because it's, when you look at the history panel, like many people do, you'd see back up here there was a step that said filter, but you've now done 5 other things. So if you wanted to change that filter, you've lost the other 5. This eliminates that because it's now editable filters. And the other added bonus of it is when you have smart filters, it comes with a mask. So if there was a part of the image where you applied a filter and said, I don't really want it showing in this area, you can mask it out. And that mask, of course, is also editable. So it kind of changes dramatically the impact of just applying a filter and going, oh, well, I hope that works. That kind of wording is eliminated out of my vocabulary, because I know I always have the ability to go back and re-edit and try things. With one important addition to that is, for me, I don't like to say always, but I honestly can't think of too many cases where it's not the word always. I always save my working file as a PSD, which means it preserves layers, smart filters, smart objects, masks, everything. So I might end up with a document that has 12 layers and masks and filters and all kinds of things, but the benefit is I save it as a PSD file. I can come back later and edit anything. The other advantage is I come back sometimes to images I created 3 years ago and say, how the heck did I do that? Well, my layer panel tell me. A lot of people rely, I think, a little too much on the history panel. Right? As you're working, the history panel shows you what you've done. Here's one problem with the history panel. It's today's history. If you close your document, there's no more history. The next time you open that document, the only thing in the history is going to say open. So this, looking at a layers panel that says you have 3 layers, you have a mask, you have a smart filter, you've done, it's right there. So you have the ability to kind of reverse engineer and or repurpose. You might say, oh, I like that overlay effect I did on that image. I can drag it into a different one. So it opens up this non-destructive way of working, opens up a whole world of interesting possibilities. All right, so here's my first example of taking photos with Photoshop in mind. I had this idea that I wanted to create the effect of bokeh in a background, but instead of doing it after the fact using some blur and trying to hope that it looked kind of like a bokeh effect, I got my, as you can tell, extremely willing wife to stand in front of this cool brick wall. So I focused on her with my long lens, and she was like, are you finished yet? Because she knew I told her what I was doing, so she wasn't like, smile for the camera. She was just like, oh, here we go again. So I did that, and then I just very politely and lovingly said, now can you please move out of the frame for a moment? And then I took a second photo without changing any settings. So obviously you can't have autofocus on to do this, so everything was manual, but now I have beautiful bokeh background waiting for a new subject. Okay, so that's a simple example of a way to take advantage of your camera settings to get a great background that's ready to use a subject. So once again, I'm going to open this as an object, just in case I decide to edit it. And then, a lot of people complain about the fact of like selecting hair. Here's the perfect solution for it. I don't really ever have to worry about that anymore, so I will do something later on with hair and stuff like that. But for now, I'm going to just drag and drop. By the way, if you've never done drag and drop before, drag and drop is a way of combining images together without copying and pasting or anything like that. It's called drag and drop, but it probably should be called drag, wait, drag, drop. Because then most people drag and drop and go, it didn't work. Because you have to drag, wait till the image changes, then release. And it says, oh, there we go. So one of the wonderful new features, in the past, if I was going to select me, I would have used, I don't know, the quick selection tool or something like that, or if you get paid by the hour, the pen tool, but I don't use that anymore. So I'll just use the select subject option. Select subject is a wonderful function that's getting better and better. And one of the things to make mental note of is when you're looking at the preferences for the select subject, you can either do it locally or through the cloud. The cloud takes us a bit longer, but is generally more accurate. So once I've done that, I want to see if I need to do any refinement. So I like to have some selection tool selected and then click on the Select and Mask button. And I don't know why it's not. Oh, there we go. I was just impatient. So here's Select and Mask. So it's previewing. Here's what subject looks on the background. And I'm not looking at this point about color matching or anything like that. I'm just looking at edges. So I don't think I need to do a whole lot in this case. As a general rule, just to be safe, I like to do this. I go in the Shift Edge and do like really small, like minus a few percentages. And I'm not a big fan of feathering things because generally I don't think people have feathered edges when they're walking around in person. So some people generally always put feathering. I'm like, if you really want to feather, then feather like 0.2 or something like that. And then at the bottom, I'm going to say output to a layer mask and click OK. So now I have my 2 layers, but I'm not terribly happy with the coloring and so on, but this is why both of these layers are smart objects coming from Camera Raw, otherwise known as Camera Raw Smart Objects. So that means, for example, now that everything's set up the way I want, I can double-click on here and say, I think I want to probably lower the exposure. The only downside, and it takes a bit of getting used to, is unfortunately I can't see the background, so I'm a little out of context, but it's not that hard to go back and forth, maybe change the temperature a little bit, anything you want. And then it's going to update, but it's still with that nice effect of creating that realistic background because it is a real background. It's not me going to Photoshop and trying to use some blur settings to make it kind of look like that kind of background. Today, I am not saving anything because we're all just demonstrating, but once again, I would normally be saving this as a PSD file so that I could go back and continue reworking this if I needed to. So here's another interesting example. This takes a bit more work, but I had this inspiration a number of years ago, and photographers always look at me oddly when I'm unpacking my camera gear and I have this little collapsible cone that I got. So it's like a safety cone that's meant, it actually comes with a little battery and a flashing light so when you're changing your tire. But the cool thing is it collapses down. It's like the base is like this big. So it doesn't take very, and people, why? Are you worried about people going to run you over while you're taking photos? And I was like, I do a lot of compositing people onto a background. And the problem is, I take a background like this, and then later on I take a photo of someone in my studio, and I'm like, are they this tall? Are they this tall? You know, it's kind of hard to know the ratio or the context. Or another example, maybe I'm taking photos of a whole bunch of kids on a basketball team, but they can't all come the same day. So I set up my tripod and I put the cone in the photo. So now when I go to composite them together, I have a frame of reference to know how tall everyone is. So the trick is, put my camera on a tripod and I take one photo with the cone in it, and then I take another photo where I've removed it. So this is my actual background, okay? Then in my studio, I take a photograph, or wherever you are, doesn't have to be a studio, of course. I take a photo with the same cone in there, and once again, the old drag and drop. Now, we just lower the opacity a little bit. So now when I go to like free transform, I've got something where I know how much do I need to transform it. You don't have to be exacting, but it's better than guessing, right? And I can, of course, I can zoom in and if I wanted to be really accurate. But what the side effect of this, because the first time I was strictly thinking height. But then there were times where I was like, wait, that cone is kind of tilted a bit. Or there was one that was actually, you can kind of see it in this case, actually. Let me just hide this layer for a second. Look in the background on the mirror. Can you see the reflection of the safety cone? If I was compositing someone in there, I never would have thought of worrying about those little tiles in the background. I've had other cases where there was a puddle, and I didn't think about it, but I saw the orange reflected in the puddle. I went, oh, I should probably think about that. So it's actually a pretty cool thing. I don't get any commission on the sales of collapsible safety cones, but usually that company's like, why did we suddenly sell like 15 safety cones in the last week or so? It's like, yeah. So basically, you use that as your reference to get the right sizing, right? And then we don't need this layer anymore, so we can hide that. On this one, once again, we're going to do select subject. And you don't have to do this every time. I just like to do select and mask first just to make sure that I'm not missing anything obvious before I click the actual mask button. And it looks perfect. She is like so natural and floating in space. It looks absolutely perfect. But otherwise, positioning, size, and everything, I'm quite happy with that. And of course, I can continue to, move her around if I need to, if I want her to be a little more centered. Now, at this point, in previous, if this was 4 or 5 years ago, I would have taken the next 25 minutes to show you different methods for trying to create a shadow on her feet to make it look realistic, including trying to use the original shadow or trying to paint a shadow. It's like, yeah. Or now, this is to me where there is a purpose for AI. You make a selection and you type in generative fill, and then we need to type something in here. So first time being a man of few words, I typed shadow. So it created like some random shadow of I don't know what, and I'm like, okay. So I was like, you know what, being a lazy man, I tried like 4 or 5 things. I'm like, there's this other tool. Anyone heard of ChatGPT here? And no one's probably ever used it to like create things, right? But so I went into, I'm not going to do it now, but I'll show you here. Oh, I already closed it. Hold on a second. I just copied in my notes. So I need a prompt for generative fill in Photoshop that will keep the subject's shoes unchanged, but will add a realistic shadow to their feet. And it created a prompt that said, add a realistic shadow on the ground under the feet without altering the shoes. I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. So I copied that, and I pasted that in here and said, go ahead then. Now, one of the most fun things of teaching Photoshop in front of a live audience is generative AI never works as well in front of an audience as it does when you're sitting at home in front of your computer. So we shall see. Oh, thank you for changing her shoes completely, even though I told you not to. So yeah, okay. I kind of had a feeling that might happen. Let's see what the other options give us. Oh, different pair of shoes, okay. Oh, that's much better, yeah, perfect. Okay, so clearly, the instruction alone was not enough. So, and by the way, I kind of knew that was going to happen because it happened to me too. So I said, you know what? I removed from the selection her shoes. Ha! Even though I said, don't change her shoes, it still didn't. So we'll try this again. The other fun thing about generative AI in a live situation is that little blue progress bar always takes longer when people are watching. I see, now that's pretty good, right? I mean, I don't honestly know after 5 minutes if I would have created that shadow, but to me, that looks pretty good. Let's see what the other ones look like. Hardly any shadow. Yeah, so this one definitely looks pretty good. So to me, that is a great use of AI, is to say something that used to take me 20 minutes if I'm lucky, and I'd still look at it and go, it's not bad, but it's also not great. The biggest length of time with generative AI is that little blue progress bar while it tries to generate things. But to me, that's a pretty good example of when I would use it, is for things like that. Okay. All right. Don't need her either. By the way, it also, the first couple of times I worked with models when I was trying this, and I just sort of casually walked over and put a pylon beside them, and they were just like, should I be worried for my own safety? Is there a reason for that? But I would usually explain it. Okay, here's another example of an image that back in some time ago, I would say, many years ago, like 5, if you wanted to take a picture of some landmark in a busy spot, there was this technique that people would use where you'd either use a tripod or get yourself in a really good stance and take multiple pictures as people were moving, and then use these things in Photoshop called stack modes. Anyone ever tried that in Photoshop, stack modes? Some people used to call it the tourist removal tool, because you take like 6 photographs of people, so the only constant was the subject matter, and then the people were moving, and it would use some mathematics to remove the people. And generally, it would either be amazing or pretty darn good. But now it's even easier. But I want to tell you one quick story about this. This is in Vancouver, BC, and I'd been using the same photo or photos for years to demonstrate the tourist removal thing, and I thought, I need to update my photos. So I was walking by this thing from the Olympics from Vancouver. So I sat on a bench because I didn't have a tripod, and I was all like stabilized, and I took the first photo of people walking by, and then I'm like this, and I'm going, where are all the people? And I put my phone down, and all these polite Canadians are going, and waiting for me to take the photo, and I'm like, no, I need you to go. Thank you, I'm Canadian too, so I'm like, I get it. But it's like, please, just keep moving so I can take more photos. But it was always kind of a hit or miss thing. So this is another example where that remove tool we used before, just going through. The other thing with that previous stack mode thing was sometimes you'd get these weird ghosting things that would be in really inopportune, inconvenient places, so then you'd have to spend just as much time cloning and healing, trying to get rid of them. Whereas here, I don't know, let's see. I don't want to give it too much build up, because this will be the time where it'll fail miserably, but let's see. I think usually it's pretty good. This is where we need like the Jeopardy music or something. And I predict, oh, look at that. Okay, so that was me. I missed those 2 people there. But I mean, looking at things that used to be the giveaway as lines, like steps, you would notice it. You'd be a little off. That's pretty good, isn't it? And it's way better than that whole take multiple photos, put them in a stack, and do all the math and hope that it worked, and so on. So this is, to me, is the beauty of AI, is this type of AI, where it's still a photo I took, but it's creating some really interesting possibilities, things that used to take me longer. And to me, this is what this is about, is saving time. I love working in Photoshop. I love working in Photoshop with my photos, but I don't like wasting time or doing things over again. So for me, at worst now, it might be like cases of her shoes where it kind of went, yeah, I'll just change her shoes. So yeah, in that case, I had to redo, but it still didn't take me all that much time. All right, let's look at this guy. Before I joked about, if you take a photo of a bald guy like me, it's not a problem, but look at this guy. He's got a mustache going on. There's a chain against the background. His glasses have a little area that's a bit of an issue. If I had, in the past, had looked at this and said, I want to composite him on a new background, a part of me would have been like, or not. Because I just kind of had a sense, when you use Photoshop enough, you kind of know, this could take a while. So let's just see. Actually, first I want to put him on a background. I always like to have a background here. So this is one that's not in the bokeh kind of thing. I just wanted something as a background. Oops. Now, it doesn't matter the order. You can either do select subject in here and get the mask and then drag him over. The only reason I always like to start with the subject on the background is so I can do that quick select and mask just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And again, these are both Camera Raw smart objects, which means I still have the opportunity to edit the settings for them. So again, select subject. This one probably might take a moment or two longer, actually not that much, but I wish there was a way for me to have a time machine and show you what it would have looked like in the past when I did my first run with some selection tool. The chain would have been miserable. It would have missed the mustache. I mean, that, to be honest, is a really good selection. I used to teach whole classes on making selections, and I would always tell people, you need to expect that it's going to take you multiple steps to end up with a really good selection. Now it's like, well, or just use select subject. I mean, that's pretty darn good. Let's just do a quick select and mask preview to make sure. I have mine, I think, set to a default of showing the new background. You can also view it in other ways, but I like to use this one called on layers, which means show me the layers. But you can also preview the mask. So that's the mask that it created. Is it absolutely perfect? No. Is it pretty darn good? You bet it is. Is it better than I would have done, taking much longer? Definitely yes. So this is pretty amazing. Now, we're going to still tweak it a little bit, but I wanted to show you what that looks like. I mean, it's still pretty good. Even the chain, you can see there's a little bit of, if you're really critical, I would like some of these to be a little more see-through. So if you Option or Alt-click on the mask, you can actually view the mask. And I'm going to give you, if you're not familiar with this, one of the best little tricks for fine-tuning a mask is you take a tool like your paintbrush, and in this case, I want to paint with black. So these holes in the chain should be black, right? And you can see there are some that are gray. So if I just simply try to make a really small brush and paint with black, the onus is on me to make sure I'm incredibly accurate. But one of the most wonderful little masking tools is to go to the blend mode for the tool and change the blend mode to overlay. And what it does, oops, I actually painted with that, sorry, is it changes the way a painting tool operates. Now, black can no longer paint on white. I'm attempting, can you see my mouse moving? That's me trying to paint with black. It won't let me, because black on overlay mode cannot change white. It can only change shades that are slightly lighter than it. So for example, let's use this one right here. Look at that. I didn't have to worry. I just zipped right across. I didn't have to worry about getting into the white by mistake. Okay? And it works the same way. If you have something that, oh, thank you, I'll take credit for that. I invented that. No, that's overlay. And it also works the other way round. See this part here, this part, I could do the same thing. Now I'm going to give you one warning here before I go too far. Normally, I don't do this on the mask. I mean, let me rephrase that. Normally, I don't do that in mask view because I want to see it in the context of the photo. So I'm going to show you that in a second. I just wanted you to be really clear on what's happening. But here's the danger. If you're editing in this mode, you might go, whoa, I can do this overlay here and here and here, and before you know it, you're kind of destroying it in the context of the background photo. So I'm going to actually undo some of these. And now what I would actually do is I'm still on the mask, but now when I'm painting in the context of the actual background. Because sometimes what will happen is you'll think, ooh, that was a bit much. Maybe I should paint it 80% black, not 100. So still technically painting on the mask, but we're viewing it as the layer, in a sense, in the context of the actual background. So sometimes, depending, like in here around his mustache, there was some kind of feathery gray stuff. I might change the opacity to maybe 50%, so I make sure I'm not doing it too dramatically, too quickly. I'm a keyboard shortcut junkie, so I almost did it without telling you. So I'll tell you that when I'm in the mode of doing this kind of compositing things together, I never go up to the opacity of the brush, up there where it says 100%. I just tap the number 5. So whenever you're working with opacity on brushes, on layers, you just have to type the first, or tap the first number of whatever opacity you want. So if you want 60, you just type 6. 7 for 70, 8 for 80, and so on. So that way you're really focusing your attention on what you're doing, not worrying about going back and forth to some setting. The only one that's a little odd is to get back to 100, it's 0. So if you want to get 100% opacity, you tap the number 0, which is a little weird, but So again, now I can do a little bit of cleanup here. Up here, I think I want his mustache to show just a little bit more, so I'm going to swap my foreground color to white. So now as I paint, I'm making that come out a little bit. Up here, that should be see-through to the background. So now I need to go back to 100% opacity and black. And now I can make sure that I'm seeing through. I'm still in overlay mode, so that's not going to help. So let's go back to normal. So now we're making it the part where there's an actual hole in his glasses. Okay? So that's the kind of thing that I would consider doing. Now, just to show you the other option, which I showed at the beginning with my kind of starting title slide, is that if you were working with someone and they said, I want some magical, fantasy background that you don't have the ability to create and you can't find something, this is where you could use the part of AI which is Firefly, where you can just type in some prompt and it generates something. Again, I'm not a fan at all of just using that as a standalone thing, but to complement my image, that's something I would consider. So once again, I thought, well, he's kind of a steampunk-looking guy, so I went to ChatGPT and said, I need a prompt for Firefly in Photoshop to generate a background of a steampunk laboratory filled with equipment. Boy, did it go to town. I'm like, sure, let's try it. Now, to be perfectly honest, I also tried typing in steampunk laboratory, and it wasn't bad. So it's like, it just looks more impressive when people are looking over your shoulder to say, look at all that stuff that I put in as a prompt for this one. Now, I have no idea. This is the beauty, again, of live AI stuff, is that it's probably going to be very different than the one that I have. It's going to create 3 alternatives. Let's see what we got here. I mean, right? Not bad. Pretty interesting. The only thing that I found when I was playing with this is things like dials on equipment have like 47 numbers that make kind of don't look like actual numbers. So words and numbers and things, every so often you'll be like, for example, if you put in clock, I imagine it probably would not necessarily look like a clock. And you may have discovered, if you've ever tried this, Firefly, with anything involve hands, good luck. So as a hobby, I sing in a barbershop quartet. And one of the things that's become my standard for any AI generation tool is to type in men's barbershop quartet and see what it gets. And I got to tell you, if you ever want to amuse yourself for like 20 minutes, just try it. Because generally, I mean, how many people are in a quartet? 4. You would think. I mean, of anything, the basic, like maybe barbershop would confuse it, but quartet is 4. Instead, I get 3 or 7, and they're holding microphones that look like something that was made between a saxophone and I mean, it's very strange. Okay, that's my little pet peeve. So one other little thing to show you an idea of things you can do with your camera. I happen to have a smoke machine for Halloween, and I thought, oh, this might be fun to create smoke that I can use in things like mist or whatever. So I just, very simple, set up some constant lights with a black background and took some photos, and I want to try to get it as kind of black and white as possible. And we'll just open this. I went a little overboard. Sorry, I didn't do it. The one time I didn't do a smart object. Let me try that again. I went the wrong way on the blacks. There we go. So I could just drag this into something, but because I want to use it on a fairly regular basis, the other option is I'm going to invert it and then go under the Edit menu and choose Define Brush Preset. And whatever's black or gray will be the brush, whatever's white will be transparent. So now I have a brush very nicely called the name of my raw file. I wouldn't necessarily suggest just using terms like brush 1, brush 2, brush 3. I mean, you will still be able to use them, but just from make life a little easier. So now I have a layer. You get white as my foreground color, switch to my brush tool. It's already selected, and then I can just click, and on that layer I've got this nice little movable, well, I can't move it too much because that's where I define the brush at the top, so I could probably mask that out. But anyway, anything can be made into a brush that now it's built into Photoshop, so it's very easy to apply that, and particularly if you put on a layer, then you can play with opacity and things like that. So I have 3 or 4 of these different brushes. Just as a little side story, it's kind of funny. 10 years ago, I was demonstrating this, and I was actually talking about Adobe Stock and how from Bridge you can upload to Adobe Stock. So I did that, and I just randomly chose one of those smoke images to demonstrate it, and I've probably made about $300 in sales of that smoke just from something I randomly went, oh, I'll just use this one. And over the last 10, I mean, I get like emails every day going, you made $1.17. I'm like, yes. But for something that all sort of started as a joke, it's like, okay. Okay, last example to show you here. I probably should open them both at the same time, be easier. A couple of photos that I want to combine together because I like the way he's looking at her, but I have this other one where she's looking at the camera, and I also like the way the kind of the car is positioned here. So I'm going to stick with I just wanted to show them to you, but I can take both of these and load them into layers. And this was not done on a tripod, so the chances are pretty good that they don't match up. So I select both layers, and these are not new functions, not AI. This is just something that's been around for a long time. I want to auto-align the layers, and of course, with a name like auto-align layers, they're under the Edit menu, not the Layer menu, which, okay. And it does a wonderful job of lining them up. Sometimes I just do this for my own amusement, just like, that's pretty funny. No actual purpose of showing you that, but so I lined the documents up, but all I really want is her head. But to me, sometimes it's just easier to line them both up because I might at some point find that there are different elements of different layers that I want to mask. But whenever you add a layer mask by default, it adds it in show all mode, which means nothing's going to happen until you paint on it. But if you hold down the Option or Alt key, it fills the layer mask with black. So now, sorry, I did in the wrong order. Hold on, let's do this the right way. Okay, there we go. This one should be on top. So now, I just need to make sure my brush is back to 100% normal. And not the smoke brush, Dave. That would not work well. It would be better to have just, a regular brush. Thank you very much. Okay. And it's a giant brush. There we go. Okay, so now, what are you telling me that for? Just because I'm trying to rush to finish. Okay. My brush is too small, so it's going to take me longer, but I want to just finish it. So you can see, even though when I took the photos, they weren't perfect. I mean, if in an ideal world, I would have been on a tripod, and I could fill in the rest, of masking to reveal the others. But this, to me, is, a nice little touch. Now, if I had another 5 or 10 minutes, which I don't, I would say the other thing I would consider doing, well, let me just, sorry, I'm going to do this one thing. I'm a little distracted by the area back here. It's kind of brightly colored, and I wish it wasn't. So I could try going in and changing the exposure, but this is another case where I would, because it doesn't take very long, try to generate, and I didn't type anything in. You always have the option of having it just look at the material that's already in the background and see what it creates. This will be fun to see what, what this one does. Oh, trees, cool. I mean, it doesn't look terrible. just to show you, because I don't want to leave on a good note, here's the one that I did previously. And then the stuff that was filled, created with generative fill, and I did a little bit of painting with some color, so it took away some of the distractions that were in the background. Again, still my photography, but just trying to take advantage of other options in Photoshop to finish it off and end up with the image that I want to do. Because to me, that's what it's all about, is doing things in Photoshop to enhance your photography so you create images you love. Thank you.